Today, I welcome Vicki Delajoyo, author and founder of The Way of Joy, a spiritual fitness program. Vicki is a transformational speaker, presentation skills coach, and award winning theater performer and director. She is also the host of the National Qigong Association's monthly interview program, Qi Talks. In 2013, Vicki was inducted into the Association of Women Martial Arts Instructors Hall of Fame for her 40 plus years experience teaching Qi or energy practices. Since 1975, her transformational workshops and classes have empowered thousands of wellness motivated, spiritually inclined seekers to step into their power and infuse body, mind, spirit practices into their very selves so they can tap into their birthright of joy. Use it as fuel, not a goal, for a lifetime. Welcome, Vicki.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Rose. It's so good to see you.
Same here. I am so excited about us chatting.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, great. So I'm going to just dive right in so that we have enough time to go over so much that I would love to talk to you about. Yes, just tell us first about yourself, your story.
Well, there's like a lot of stories, right? I mean, stories are the thing. But basically, I am somebody who is really passionate about how we communicate, whether it's one to many or one on one. I'm interested in the energy behind our communication. So a lot of times people think just about the words and how they're saying words, but there's also another piece of it which has to do with what is it informing those words. So I'm interested in that, and I have a big passion for martial arts, especially for Qigong over the last many years. I realized when you read that, it was like I'm actually now over 50 years of doing these
Wow.
practices. So I guess it's a lifestyle at this point. And I'm somebody who comes from a very nitty gritty background. Like, I grew up in New York City. It's sort of what you see is what you get. And really, in a way, I would say I'm somebody who's become my own worst fear, because I was afraid that when I came to California and that I would just become this woo-woo person whose feet never touch the ground. And, now woo-woo is part of how I make my living for the last 50 plus years. So go figure.
Yes, great. I love that. I love your story, and I know you have so much more to offer. And I've been reading your book and learning a lot more about you because we do
Mm,
know each other from outside the scope of this podcast.
yes.
But I am so excited that the audience will learn more about you. So I've been reading your book, which I have here, and I'll also put everything in the show notes. Of course, I always mention that. The Way of Joy. Can you tell us what inspired you to write your book and actually create this program, The Way of Joy?
Oh, I love that question so much. I don't think I've ever been asked that quite that way. I wrote it because I had been teaching at that point for many, many years. And at that stage in teaching, I was having what one of my students named Dharma talks. I wouldn't have claimed that particular word because I don't really have a lot of basis in that system. But anyway, I was doing these talks about the themes that were coming up for me through the practice of Qigong. So for me, Qigong, which I guess your listeners may know already, is Chinese martial art for a lot directed towards healing. I found that these forms had information that I loved to explore and that would come up for me as I would be in my own practice. I remember when I was a kid studying Tai Chi Chuan, I remember asking at one point the master, what is this? What does this move mean? What is that, other than the martial application? And he said, well, when you're very old, you'll know. I was like, okay, maybe I'm very old, but at that point, in my teaching, I was just kind of getting these messages, and so I would hold these different um, evening sessions, which would just be people talking, and I would lead discussions in things like a theme of like everything is useful. No matter what happens in our lives, we can compost it. We can look at what it is. And it's beyond just like what is the lesson in a negative experience, but also what is it that's helping us grow? What's prompting us to grow? Things like that, or talking about how she moves in the space between, or talking about boundaries and how to energetic boundaries serve us, and what does it mean not to have them. those kinds of themes. And as I was talking, people kept saying, I want you to write a book. I want you to write a book. And finally, I just decided to do it. I tried to do it for a while, wasn't having much success because what turned out that I needed to do was just actually take a break from teaching, go off into solitude and write it from there. So I did that. And that ended, I thought I was going to be taking off 6 months to write the book. It ended up taking 3 years.
Oh, wow.
But that's partly because when I was happily like in the country, working on my book, just, taking walks in nature, talking into a microphone, because at the time we didn't have cell phones, but I was able to, transcribe what I heard. And it's sort of in that happy creative process. And I got a call from my uncle, who was like a dad to me, and had just been diagnosed with end-stage lung cancer. And he wanted me to bring my mom, his little sister, to be with him. So I did that, was with him during his dying process, and then came back. And one of my senior students, who was a very dear friend, and my mom were both diagnosed with cancer. Rachel with end-stage lung cancer, and my mom with breast cancer. So anyway, basically, I had borrowed money to take time off to write the book. And I remember a friend saying to me, Vicki, this is so hard. You took this time off to write this book, and now you're doing all this caretaking in different ways. And I realized that I didn't feel oppressed by it. I felt like it was kitchen testing my book, because the premise of my system is that joy, or the heart, is fuel. It's something that is our birthright. It's something that we are born with. It gets damaged in various ways as we get older and experience various types of challenges in our lives, but that it's something that I believe is ours to own, and that if we can just take that and work with it, that can really inform everything. And so then it was like, well, what does joy mean if people that you love are dying or suffering? Not just if I'm suffering, but what if I'm seeing, trying to be helpful for other people? What is joy? Where's joy there? And so it felt like, using my practices and the things that I had been teaching really helped me get through those times. And that was just the beginning of a whole series of death and dying that happened in my life as during that period of time while I was writing. But it made me feel really grounded in it, because I knew it worked for me. So that meant it would work for some other people, maybe not everybody, but it would work for other people, to sort of look at these practices as a way to navigate when things are hard as well as when things are blissful.
That is so true. I think we all experienced that. Yes, so I've been enjoying your book. It's wonderful information, but I plan on rereading it because there's just so much information, and I have all these little post-it notes everywhere. And you talk about there's you came up with various principles. Would you mind just kind of giving us a little overview of what those principles are, about talking about heaven and then earth, and how like we're in between, we're the conduit in between.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, yeah, I'd be happy to. That was really informed by my Qigong practice of Shen Qi and Jing. So that means heaven, human, and earth. And what I've taken the liberty of doing, or sort of drawn in terms of how do I personally experience these, I came up with a structure where, so heaven has to do with our inspiration, with our wisdom, with our ability to see the whole picture, be able to have perspective. It's our link to the divine. If you have a spiritual tendency, and if you're somebody, it's up for people who take my classes who are atheist or who don't have that, I feel like it's a connection to that ability to have an overview, like you were floating around up in the universe, and you look down at your life, and it was like little ants
Right.
living their lives. Your life seemed really small. It's that sort of big perspective, the we are all one perspective. We're all part of the same fabric. That's the heaven realm. And then I thought of those as three, what I call laws. Those, in other words, things that are universal, like the law of buoyancy or the law of gravity or something like that. That just is a physics type of a law. And then the earth realm is all about what we manifest, what we create, how we walk our talk. And then, like you said, the human realm, the heart is really the conduit between these two. And the human realm is all about our individuality, how we take the ahas of the heaven realm, or the possibility thinking that the heaven realm includes, and then personalize it so it becomes it emerges through you, through your experiences, through the ways in which you think or see things. So it's something only you can uniquely bring.
Mm.
So it's like this personalization of something very universal comes through and becomes personal. And then the actions and choices that we make and how we walk our talk, that's the earth realm. So that's how I see those three. So I have three laws for the heaven realm, three principles for the human realm, and three actions or activities for the earth realm. That's one way of describing the system. The system is complex. In fact, I've been almost embarrassed about it because there are people like you who like go, oh, this is so cool. And they do post-its. And I have people who open the book at random and that's their message for the day. And then other people who start to read it and they'll go, oh my gosh, this is really multi-layered. It's, it's very dense. The material is pretty dense because of this system that's, I don't even know how it came through me. It just did. It was like, and it took a while for it to form, but I do feel the integrity of it. The integrity
Yeah.
of what I'm saying holds true. And like I said, it feels like partly because of how it's applied to how I live my life and how I see students use it. Um, and how it is, my own interpretation of these
Mm.
Taoist concepts.
Do you use the book in your course, The Way of Joy?
I draw from it all the time when I teach. So when I teach, I mean, it's the, the concepts that I'm teaching predate the book. And for when I first wrote the book, I think for the first 3 years after I wrote it, I had courses that were specifically on the book where people would read a chapter or part of a chapter, and then we would work on that. And then,
Mm.
so I would take people through the book so that we were able to really what's interesting to me is how does it work for you? How does it get personal to you? What does it mean for you to have a circles open into spirals concept? What does that mean for you? How do you use it? So I did teach courses that way, and it's interesting that you asked because I've been hungry to do that again.
Just so our listeners know that your last name means, well, it means dello gioio, is of the joy, or is that how you interpret it as well?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
is your given name, not a
Yeah,
made up
at
name.
some point I realized that my name actually, my name Victoria, Victory of
Victor,
Joy, and it was
there you
like,
go.
what in the world does that mean? And that's part of what instigated this whole system. Really, it was like, what would it mean to live that as a legacy?
And you know what? There's no coincidences. That you were
Yeah,
meant to walk this path, as we say. Right?
yeah, it
I
feels
love
that to
that.
me. Yeah.
You talk a lot about awareness of energy and tuning in and understanding what's going on. It's a lot of what you weave throughout your book. Why is it important for people to become aware of their energy? And maybe describe what energy is in your terms.
Yeah, because it's more than just get up and go, right?
Yeah.
I think of energy as sort of the unifying unifying element that unites all of us living beings, whether it's people, plants rather, or insects or animals, or that energy is that which connects all of us.
Mm.
And I think of it as something, I don't know, I've been reading a book by Francesco Garipoli, a friend of ours who's
Mhm.
a Qigong master, and I mean, he talks about energy as being something or chi as being born in the quantum field that appears and then pulls back, that it sort of sparks, and then that it's not something, and in traditional Qigong, they often talk about energy as something that you want to conserve and direct and all of that. I think of it as something that's a kind of the part of ourselves that is the aliveness of us. The energy is our aliveness, it's our life force. Um, and I think that it's important because for me, one of the things most important about remembering that even more than a narrative being, I'm an energetic being, um, is that it reminds me that just how magical the world is. That like what an incredible phenomenon to have this body with all these systems going on, whether I pay attention to them or not, to be able to have connections, in the ways in which we do, to be able to be close and intimate, to be able to read people's energy and know, oh, this is dangerous or this is drawing me in, all of that. It's such an intangible thing to talk about. How do you think about it? How do you define energy?
Oh, wow. Well, geez, I never even thought about it. I think it's in my mind, but I never really had a opportunity to conceptualize it other than how my teacher taught me. It's just, um, I think it's just something that is unique to everybody. I also agree with you that it's just this underlying connection that we have with the universe and everyone in the universe, but it's something that is just unique to everyone. It's my
Mhm,
energy is unique to me, and what I
mhm.
do with it is part of it is an awareness of how I'm feeling on a day to day, or how I'm feeling in relation to another person, or a challenge, or things like that. So I think I'm trying to understand more about what my energy is or what energy is in general.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's
you
kind of
hear it.
unnameable in a
Yeah, it
way.
is. And you hear, you hear a lot about it. I'm watching the Nick game last night. They're using the term energy. He had so much energy, and there was so much energy around that play. They use it a lot. And, so it's being used a lot more. And I think people are, like you said, it's really undefinable, but people are defining it in their own way in different
Yeah.
aspects.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking when you were talking about um the connections with people, that kind of thing, which I talked about too, I would think of that as kind of human realm energy, right? Because I think of the
Yes.
human realm as where we are interconnected with the world around us. And then when I'm thinking about the energy of in a athletic event, that's really physical, right? That's earth realm. That's your
Oh,
gym.
yeah.
It's that base, and then there's the energy that has to do with, the where does this idea come from? Something pops up. I'm inspired. I get this new sense, or I feel connected to the divine, or these that's all heaven realm energy. So, I mean, it's all the same thing, and yet it resonates in different areas of our lives and our being,
Yeah.
with different functions.
In your book, you talk about barriers and boundaries. So it talks in a way, we're kind of segueing from what we were saying about other people's energies. So you talk about it as a principle in the human triad that you
Right.
write about in your book. Can you talk about the boundaries in general and the importance of having them? And then or maybe just talk about what you mean by barriers and boundaries.
Yeah.
We'll start there.
Yeah, I love that you start that we're going there, because that's really to me, that is the heart of the book. It's the central chapter, so it's the heart of the book. So I think what, first of all, when I say boundaries, I really like to distinguish it from barriers. In fact, I think boundaries can dissolve barriers, which is the title of that particular chapter. Um, Boundaries I think of as being the definition of who you are. So if we think of ourselves as sort of, we come into these lives and then we sort of develop in the ways that we do, we become who we are. We start to develop, what we believe, what we think, what we feel, what we experience, the choices they make, what I know, what I don't know, um, the actions that I take, that I don't take. Those are all boundaries, right? So you could say to me, something that wouldn't be true, and I would know that that's not true. That would be part of the boundary. This is who I truly am, right?
Mm.
Um, when we don't have boundaries, when we don't have those things sort of defined and clear in ourselves, which, can pop in and out, I have to admit, but when we don't, then that's when barriers occur, where either we feel like we lose ourselves, and that kind of like, I don't know, what do you want to go? Where do you want to go for dinner? I don't know, where we just sort of give over, become, I guess you could say it's codependent, or we merge, we lose ourselves in a merge.
Attachment theory, a little
Yeah,
bit. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas with barriers, what you're doing, that so you lose yourself, or you want to protect yourself, and so you put out these barriers that I think of as like porcupine quills, and where you just, as I need my space, I need to have, but it's not just like I need some space, I want to take some time alone. It's like I need space. It's forceful, and it's creating a wall. And I believe that when we have our boundaries clear, and we're with somebody else whose boundaries are clear, that's where intimacy occurs. Because otherwise, like I said, we completely lose ourselves, or we're walled off because we're trying to protect ourselves. So I think boundaries are really essential for as a means of connection, which is probably, this is just coming through me. This is not something that I've heard before, but I know that, a lot of people think of boundaries as a way of like just as being barriers, right? It's like I have to take care of myself, so I need to set some boundaries.
Yeah.
So I think of it as a slightly different way, is that when I'm centered in that, and so that's part of like a whole Qigong thing, right? How do we come back to center? How do we align ourselves? That when we're in that place, of boundary that it's really connecting. So like when you're with somebody and they're really clear about what they want, it can be really just such a relief, right? It's like, oh, I can feel more connected to you when I understand that.
Yeah. Talk about talking about qigong here. Maybe we could talk a little bit about wei qi, which is how creating, let's say you have a hard time creating a boundary, and some people do. They're just, they don't know where they begin or what ends, and there's a miscommunication and
Projections, yeah,
rejection and
projection.
all that.
Mhm.
But in qigong, there's something called wei qi, and it's almost building a barrier sort. And I think you've had some um, experiences in your life where Wei Chi came in handy, and you have a wonderful story to tell. I think you know what I'm referring to. If you don't
Yeah.
mind talking about that,
No, I don't ever mind talking about it. So
it's a
Wei
great
Qi, the
story.
concept of Wei Qi is what's informed my understanding of boundaries. So that, just to be really clear, it didn't just come from my brain. It was as the more I practiced, the more I understood and Wei Qi, for people who don't know, is basically your externalized energy. So there's Nei Qi, what's happening internally, and then there's Wei Qi, what's happening externally. And I always look at how do those interplay and how do they match. But for me, when I started thinking about boundaries, it was because of my first experience about Wei Qi, which was when I was walking down the street one day. I had been just working out at a Kajikembo studio, which is a martial art that's a self-defense form. It's a fighting form. So there's a lot of sparring in there. And I was walking home thinking, I just don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to fight. I don't want to hurt people anymore because I'm tired of getting injured myself. There's got to be another way. And as I was thinking that, this guy walked around the corner. And I think a lot of, at least women, will relate to, sometimes you see somebody and you can feel this is not this is not okay. And the reason I had been studying self-defense was because I had been attacked on the street several times in my life before. And so I really wanted to learn how to protect myself. So, but instead of going into some kind of, I'm going to protect myself thing, uh, I, um, I just remember instinctively just straightening up my spine, lifting the crown of my head, and it was like there was space in between each of my vertebrae. And the thought that came to me was, I am, as opposed to you can't. And that's become the theme for me of what boundaries are. I am as opposed to you can't. So anyway, I stood up tall. The guy reached out to grab me, and his hand bounced about 6 inches or less from my body, but he was really reaching for me. He bounced, and I walked away looking at his hand and then looking at me and looking at his hand back and forth. So I knew he hadn't missed. This was something that was a real thing. And I got home, and there was a phone call from somebody who became one of my Qigong teachers saying, I think you need to stop focusing on fighting arts and do more of the internal arts. And then I learned from her this concept of Wei Qi, that this field basically had happened. And then I started, so this is what I learned was the name of what happened, because I didn't know, I wasn't thinking, oh, I need to expand my Wei Qi field. I just was like, I'm going to stand tall and I'm going to be who I am. And then this energy field emerged, and he felt it. And I wasn't thinking about it. It just happened. It was spontaneous. A few years later, I was speaking on a stage. I had, uh, I was doing it was a conference, and there were different people there, and I think I was one of 3 women and about 40 men. And we were all supposed to have 1 minute or 90 seconds to talk about a breakout session we were going to give. So it was one by one getting up on the stage, and they were timing us. And some of the guys were going on and on. It was way more than a minute and a half. I used to work in radio, so I knew I had timed it down to the second. And when I stepped up on the stage, and I also felt, irritated that I was one of only a few women. I wanted more women's voices there. And so I felt really important that I was wanting to have a woman's voice and to sort of augment that. Anyway, as I walked up on the stage, I saw the guy start the stopwatch before I even got close to the microphone. So I just took the microphone and I just started my thing about what we were going to be doing in the breakout room. And the guy held up, the time, And I knew that I'd only had 45 seconds because I know how to time things. And so I just kept talking. And this other guy who's in the back of the room, who was kind of the MC, started coming toward me. And I remember just putting out my hand and continuing to talk. And sorry. And people started laughing. And I didn't know why they were laughing because I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just like this and talking a little bit longer and finished my minute and a half. And afterwards, I was like, I was enjoying the fact that people were laughing. I was like, oh, good, maybe I'm saying something that's amusing.
Right.
But it turned out that he was like trying to get, he was not touching me, but he was trying to get past my hand. And I was not trying to do a power trip thing at
Right.
all. I was just trying to finish my sentences. So that was another example of which I have hundreds of stories of Wei Chi now from students walking down grocery aisles. And I mean, it's just lots and lots of stories about this phenomenon that comes from this place that's entirely non-defensive. So that's where it's the boundary. It's not, I'm not trying to defend anything or my space or anything like that, but it's really about this emergence of
Hmm.
who you are at center. And
Yeah.
that creates its own, I'm not gonna know, cushion, its own expression, its own field,
Its own energy.
its own
It's
energy.
its own energy, right? So people can cultivate that through a practice like Qigong. And
Absolutely.
and I'd like to start mentioning in that you help people get on stage and speak and create their story. Do you offer exercises in creating this energy about them, this Wei Qi or even the Nei Qi? Do you weave those tools in there?
Absolutely. I absolutely do because being a speaker, standing on stage, especially for people that I work with who are either keynoters who are really passionate about changing the world or people who are speaking to sell, they have a business where they're really wanting to serve people. There's a spiritual journey in claiming that, right? Getting up on stage and being vulnerable in that way or being exposed or visible in that way. So there's a lot of inner work. It's definitely an inner work piece that has to do with, I mean, it's not Neigong specifically, but I'm doing a lot of the internal work of it. And then in terms of Wei Chi, I always have exercises for people that they can do to, first of all, align the wisdom of the heaven realm, the heart of the human realm, the action of the earth realm, so that when they're there, they're aligned in these three, what I call realms of consciousness. And then from that place, also, how do we expand our energy so that when you're speaking on a stage, it's really heart to heart, that you're not just trying to get unilateral energy out there, but there's a reciprocity that happens between
Right.
you and your audience, or you and the people who are listening to you. So yeah, Qigong absolutely informs me as a director, as a speaker coach, as well as, of course, being a performer myself. So yeah, I can't even separate them anymore, right? And I think that's one of the things that I bring to presentation skills that a lot of coaches don't really know about is how do you stand in your energy, not just feeling confident, not just being,
Not feeling cocky, but
yeah, no,
right,
it's
yeah.
not about
It's
that. It's
not
about
that.
how do you really get into the heart of who you are and communicate from that place with a place that's empowered.
I think you're saying how their authenticity is a term that's used all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's being in your own authentic self while you're
Your
uh
authenticity and vulnerability is
in
strength.
vulnerability. Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then it's always a tricky thing, right? Because you don't want to be vulnerable in a way that people are going to lean forward. Oh no, I'm so sorry that happened to you, or something like that. You don't want people to take care of you, but that sense of being transparent or open, or like you said, authentic.
Yeah.
I know that is an overused word, but it still has a deep meaning to me
Yeah.
because I see so many people fronting where their internal doesn't match the external in the speaker world. Where there's this other thing going on, and externally they're just trying to pump it out, and um, it may not seem fake to people, but there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect, and there's a way in which they're not connecting to their own hearts, so they can't connect to their audience's hearts.
Hmm. Yeah, we could probably travel down the road of social media, but I was going to save some questions for later on that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the concepts and theories and principles in your book. One of the one that I was drawn to a lot was this principle of within stillness, there is motion, and within motion, there is stillness. Can you talk about how that theory, that principle from your book, or how we can integrate that in our own lives.
Yeah, for me, when I think about stillness and motion and stillness, I think of it as the way to access um, our our guidance, our sense of connection to that heaven realm. So it's I think of it as the heaven aspect of the heaven triad, which I won't get into because it's too complex. But it's basically I think that recognition that um, first of all, the first practice being, and this is really what I learned from sparring for so long, because I did a lot of fighting, of that ability to be still when things are coming at you in different ways. And we all live, I think, our lives can be pretty chaotic, especially these days. Things are tough for a lot of people, and there's a lot of stimulus going on and a lot of divisiveness and stuff. So when we have all of this kind of chaotic energy, how do we come back to center? Basic Qigong practice, that's that stillness, having that internal sense of being able to be centered and aligned no matter what. So even if we need to move and sway, we don't lose that center. And then within the stillness is this constant motion, right? If you sit still and you meditate, your lymph systems are still going, your cardiovascular system's going, your digestive system's going, your breath, there's a lot of aliveness, and we can be in a state of stillness and tap into that movement is still happening, or even in the world around us. Like sometimes I'll go and I have a lake nearby here where I teach Qigong, and I'll sit by the lake for a while, and there's ducks walking around. It's very still, it's very quiet, but there's all this life force happening: insects, ducks, swans, pelicans, squirrels,
Cool.
skunks, all of the different, life, happening all around this
Yeah.
stillness of this beautiful lake place where, you don't hear anything but just the trees, the wind in the trees, which is another thing, another movement in the stillness. So I think that, being able to balance all the time between understanding that whenever we're still, there's motion, whenever we're moving, there's access to stillness, that this allows us to really embrace the whole of who we are.
I'm very visual, and I was picturing a mother with children, young children. And I remember when my kids were young, it was chaotic and there was never a moment of stillness.
Mhm.
And if I only had the tools that I have now with learning qigong and learning how to pause and center myself, I think I would have been able to maybe enjoy it more. It would have been less chaotic, and I don't know, just come back to that center. I think it's an important skill for people to learn,
I
to come
so
back to
agree,
that center.
Rose.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And one of the things when you were saying that, the thing that popped into my mind was that it's also self-love, right? I know so many folks, right, who are punishing themselves, angry at themselves, get stuck in the not enoughness, especially moms who are, especially single moms who are, have, there's hardly any time to breathe. And of course, breath is the way to come to that center. If nothing else, sometimes when I'm driving, and I drive a lot here in California, it's like while I'm driving, I just really want to focus on my sixth direction breathing so that I stay really present and awake to what's around me. So that, it's sort of still, but then there's the sense of this breath going here, and then there's chaos around me, and I can come to stillness, and then within that stillness is motion. So I think that, coming to that place of being able to breathe into center and to come back to center, even if it's just for a moment. It doesn't have to be like go off to the mountaintop and sit for hours. It can just be, for a moment to just focus on that breath going in and out is an act of self-love. It brings us back to being
Mm.
okay. Takes us back to instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm not, I'm doing this, but I should be doing that, and I should be doing that. It's like, come back to center and be with where you are. And it's a level of self-acceptance, self-love that feels really critical and really missing for a lot of people.
Yes, that it. And I was thinking self-compassion, and there are a lot of people out there. There's a few like Tara Brach and Kristen Neff who write about self-compassion, and they've created acronyms around that, and it's all about being mindful and aware. It
Mhm.
it all comes back to that.
Yes.
And the breath is an indicator of when things aren't right. Like you say, you go back to your breath. But if a person isn't doing well inside, their breath is an indicator of what's happening, whether they're breathing real shallow or they're breathing in more like, they're hypervigilant or something like that. That's a clear indicator. And if you're not aware of that, you'll miss an opportunity to draw to come back into that balance or to do something to help yourself. Do you think it's ever too late for someone to, we all have a story. I have to go back. I'm thinking how to phrase this. We all have a story. All our experiences create our stories. Some stories are great, some stories are not so great. But some people are stuck in their stories. You
Mm.
know, they're not happy. They didn't have this growing up. They didn't do this, they didn't do that. It's do you feel people can rewrite those stories? How can people rewrite those stories about themselves?
Oh, it's such a good question, Rose, especially these days. I think that, what you're describing stuck in their story, I think of as what I would call a victim mindset.
Mm,
So, the story being the ways in which I have been harmed, and so that's who I am, and so you have to be careful about not harming. I remember Carolyn Mace talking about this, but that there's, there's just I guess I would say that I think that yes, the short answer is yes. I believe people can rewrite their story. Um, I think that there's a way in which to kind of honor the feelings that those stories have come in, to honor what you've done, but to always listen for what is evolving in me because of it. So I have this, one of the laws of the way of joy is circles open into spirals. And this concept is like that we can kind of go around and around in terms of our feelings. So like, I can get triggered in an instant by my negative critical dad, right? In fact, for years, I'm a performer. I've been on stage, and for years, I would like focus on the people who were the most negative and looking with what I thought might be a frown, or their arms were crossed or something like that. And it would be like sort of circling this thing again and again of disapproval, and I'm not enough, and I can't do this, and I'm not doing a good job, and who the hell do I think I am, and all of those demons of doubt.
mm,
Um, uh, but as we do our inner work, which I've done a lot of work around this particular relationship in my life, that as we do that inner work, we start to move up what I think of up the spiral. So we're moving up. So there's more consciousness every time. And it's not that the feelings never come for me anymore of feeling like, oh, I don't want to be criticized or I feel tendered. It's not like but it's like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. There you are again. Okay, it's all right. So rather than feeling like I have to be dragged back down into whatever the story is attached to that, I'm not good enough, et cetera, that I can go, oh, there's that feeling that's coming back around again. What if I could just feel that and then just actually move forward from it or out of it, and circle up to another level of consciousness so that I can actually use compost these negative stories, because they're real. It's not like people don't have real true trauma in our lives. We do.
mm,
But that, how do we compost it? And that's what I love about Qigong, is that it's so much earth so inspired by earth and animals and stuff. It's really looking at, what is the breakdown of what's happening under the surface in the unconscious. How do we break that down and let it become a nutrient, as opposed to just staying in the waste
yeah.
place, right? So how do we turn things into fertilizer? Um, and to me, that circles into spirals is part of it, is that just as we do our work, we expand our awareness. And that happens through the integrity of coming back to center and being able to really listen deeper. And sometimes that requires help, right? You get help from a
Oh, of
friend,
course.
from a coach, from a family member, from somebody, a friend.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the way you explain that. And more people are really starting to understand the conditioning that occurred or the trauma that occurred in their early life and are trying to change, which is great. And we all want to live. I know one of the things I always say is I want to live the rest of my life, the best of my life.
I love
So
it. Yeah,
yeah, and I want to do and I've been doing the same work that you've mentioned. You've been doing a lot of work, and there'll always be work. It's never not
always.
gonna, yeah,
Yeah.
it's always.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
and that's
it's not a
okay.
yeah, and it's not about being in a state of bliss all the time. I wanna mention when I say the way of joy, I think of joy as a container for all emotions. So it's not like joy instead of anger or sadness or grief or it's joy is a container for all of it. And but that I think of that as the life force. So so when we're in victim mindset, there's always something there. You know, the victim mindset, all it does is perpetuate more victimhood. So I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to make you a victim, or I'm not. You know, it brings up this again, this kind of defensiveness. So I think that being able to really work it on whatever level you do, whether it's
Mm,
through therapy, whether it's through energetic medicine or plant medicine or whatever it is that people do to help heal trauma. And there's so many modalities out there that are actually effective. That then becomes particularly useful because those traumas don't go away, but they are part of who you are. And to not be victimized by them anymore is a huge step in empowerment, I think,
I
where
love
I, you know, I can have trauma in my background, but it's not ruling my choices anymore.
Speaking of that, that's a great segue. I love that. And you talk about that in your book about discernment and paying attention to our choices, which is very important, right? Because we all have choices. It's all about choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can choose to continue to feel like, uh, I'll never be enough, and that's your fault because you're looking at me that way. You know, I could
Yeah.
choose
Yeah.
or I could choose to go, oh, I'm feeling that. Well, what do I need to do to shift my mindset so that I don't feel it in this way, and that I'm able to, you know, recognize that's part of what makes me maybe more empathic, more ability to feel other people, but at
Mm,
the same time, I'm going to use that as a way to move us forward and up that spiral instead of the same dynamic occurring
right.
again and again. So yeah, choices are paramount, right? And that's the part of the human realm where we're choosing
Yeah.
in what I think of as the human realm in terms of the cultivating of discernment. What is it that feeds me? What is it that drains me? Is the thought that I'm having right now something that's making me feel good or making me feel worse? What do I need to do to change it? You know, so I can choose to feel good if I, you know, just create that mindset of awareness to be able to shift.
Yeah. And with practice, you can turn that question. It can pop up into your head right away. You can ask yourself, okay, all right, what am I doing? Am I doing something good here?
Yeah.
Or 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 should I just stop? Like I've learned like now, okay, Rose, just stop.
Take a pause, put it on
Take
pause.
pause. Exactly. Where before, and like, I'm not saying I don't spiral when I get angry. I'm Italian, and there's things that trigger me sometimes, but I'm a lot better because of all this. And
Yeah.
sometimes I say, okay, just wait until you're level headed, you're
Uh-huh.
grounded, and you can express you could come from a better place of expression.
Yeah, but you don't have to give up your Italian passion, right? You
No.
don't have to give up the passion part of it. It's really just about coming from a place that's centered as opposed so I think of it as being responsive instead of being reactive.
Yeah, that's great. You talk about expressing appreciation and gratitude and doing it intentionally. How important is it to have a gratitude practice? And is that an expression or a way of healing?
Oh, I think it is 100%. I think it's so important. And I know that there's many spiritual teachers out there that will say the same. And it's not hard, right? For a while, actually, when I first was, you know, kind of thinking about gratitude, it was like I did have a hard time remembering, well, like, what am I grateful for? Because I was so focused. I talk about choosing the story you're telling yourself, so focused on what I didn't have, what I wanted, that I was yearning for, and all that stuff. That you know, but when that starts to turn, and when it's like, oh my gosh, what can I say I'm grateful for? the breath that I have going in and out, that I have, that I have these lungs that work so well, that I have, that I have people in my life that I love and that love me, whatever it is, like that I have enough money to be able to eat, or that I have a roof over my head, whatever the things are that, I mean, some of the gratitude that I've learned have been even from people who are unhoused too. It's, in terms of like, what can I own that is mine? I think that's, I think that's a life source. I mean, I think
Mm,
it's a source of energy when we can go into gratitude, as a way to just really heal and also serve. If I'm really grateful, I can serve a lot better.
true. That
Yeah,
is true. Yeah.
yeah.
And not everyone, people I think are conditioned not to come from that perspective for whatever reason, their influences in their early life, or challenges in their life, or whatever. But it's never too late to learn how to come from a place of gratitude and
Mm.
appreciation. Um, and
Yeah, I mean, I have a morning practice where I do the microcosmic orbit, which is a very common Qigong
yes,
meditation practice that goes through many, many different systems that I've studied, all have some form of microcosmic orbit. Um, and where each of the energy points on the orbit, which there's of course many, the main ones that I work with, each of them have an affirmation, and a lot of them are about what I'm grateful for. So I just sort of run those through my body every day. And
oh,
I think to have something that's a systematic practice, whether it's a journaling or whether it's just spending a minute looking in the mirror and saying, I'm grateful to you today because you, whatever, or to do something that's, what I'm doing is really relatively more, a little more complicated, but to have a sense where you're just breathing that gratitude in, or recognizing that gratitude, it needs to be a practice. It's not something that necessarily, we're not really, we don't grow up in a culture that values it, at least here in the United States that I'm aware of.
yeah,
It's rare, right, that we even hear about gratitude unless it's in the sort of more the woo-woo spiritual world. But I think, the more we can be grateful, the more we can do this as a practice, as an active practice, as opposed to wait till something happens and then say, oh, thank you. to
yeah,
to actually know that there's something there all the time that you can be grateful for.
yeah. Well, words have energy, right?
Yes.
And if we put the appreciation and gratitude behind the words that we say to ourselves and to others, I mean, that just vibrates out, and it's a wonderful thing, a wonderful feeling. I love
Yes.
that. We want to hear about all the things that you offer.
Oh, wow. Well, good. Thank you for asking. So I basically work with people now in terms of what does it mean to step into your power presence. And so that might be anything from, working with Qigong. So I teach Qigong classes. I do, seasonal classes every season, and as well as then like 9-week packages of classes where we'll be working on some of the themes that come out in the season. And that's pure Qigong. I work with speakers, with storytellers, with actors and artists and performers on their stories. And sometimes it's a solo show for a performer. Sometimes it's somebody who wants to speak about it. They know that they were put on the planet because they have a message, and they want to look at how they can make that message really live and pop and live for people. I have a group that meets, called Embodied Joy, where those are people who are in the Qigong workshops, or classes, and then it's a kind of a add-on program where we do we meet and I do group coaching basically, and we're looking at the different concepts behind the way of joy and what's going on in your life, and what are some of the Qigong remedies that we could come up with, or what are some of the ways that I can help draw out your own problem solving ability. I'm not a coach who tends to tell people what to do. I don't like it. I don't like it when people give me advice, so I don't tend to do a lot of advice. I might make suggestions about this form might help, and this is why I think so. But I don't know why. I have this knack of knowing how to ask questions. I really like asking questions. I really like helping people find their own guidance as opposed to me being their guide. I really believe in people's innate brilliance, and that's what I'm always looking to. How can I help accelerate the access to that? Let's see, what else do I offer? If people are interested in speaking, I would encourage them to download my free gift, which I call what is it called? Let's Get Real About Charisma, 3 keys to inspire and motivate your audience every time you speak. And what that is looking at partly at the stories, and then it's also looking at what are some Qigong exercises you can do before, during, and after you're on stage to really amp up what your impact is. I think that's it for now. I mean, I don't know. I do a lot of different things. It's like hard to think
Well,
of. A lot
I'll
of
put all
different
the links in, and you host the NQA, the National Qigong Association Chi
she
Talks every
talks.
month. And there's people out there, there's a lot of Qigong instructors and practitioners. And if you are curious about what Qigong is or want to chime in, these are free talks, right? So I'll put the link
They're
to those, of
absolutely free
course.
and they're absolutely amazing. It's such a, I've been
They
doing it for
are.
10 years, and this is just a very wide range of people's approach to Qigong, because Qigong, is a word like dance, right? There's so many different styles of Qigong and theories and concepts and lineages. And so it's a very wide range of people's approach to Qigong. So it's always really interesting. And every single one has been just so enlivening to me. I love doing the Chi Talks for the National Qigong Association.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so that is free. That is free, and then for a month, so you can come
right.
live or you can listen to the recordings for a month at the nqa.org website. And then if you become a member, you actually have access to the whole 10 years of
Yeah.
interviews.
It's a wonderful community. And
Yeah.
it, you know, of course it's a plug because I belong. And there's the conference is being held in September in Savannah, Georgia. And you are one of the presenters.
I am. I know. I'm excited about it. And what I'm going to be talking about is, or working with people. It's experiential. It's not me lecturing. Is Qigong as a access to creativity.
Oh,
Because
I
I'm an
love that.
artist. I'm an artist. I'm a performing artist.
Love
I'm
it.
really always looking for, how do
Right.
these things come together? Because I believe that being able to perform and express yourself from a place of real empowered vulnerability, there's nothing like it. There's no feeling like it. So that's what we'll be playing with in Savannah.
Of course.
Another offer that I do feel like I'd
Yes.
love to make for any of you who are out there who feel like either you're interested in Qigong or know that you have a message, you feel like there's something that you want to say that's going to help raise the energy. We need that right now. I'm really feeling that. There's the level of divisiveness and stuff that's happening. If you have something that feels like it's a healing message or something that's a solution or ways in which people can heal themselves or any of that, and you want to be speaking more and you want to get a little bit of input about your story and how you do it, I would love to offer people a free session just to connect with me. And you can do that if you go to yourpowerpresence.com. That'll give you access to download the book. But even if you don't want to download the ebook, that's the guide to speaking. Even if you don't want that, you can. There's a link there that you can connect with me directly, and we can just have a chat, complimentary chat around, because I really am very dedicated at this point to getting more and more voices out there that can help create some solutions to a divided world.
I love that. It's wonderful. One of the things, we're surrounded by social media, and social media can be it can be so positive, it can be positively impactful if people just put the right messages out there. And I hope that people will start doing that and just think about how we can spread joy
Mhm.
and positive messages and all good messages out there with the tools that we have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I hope we do that.
And you're doing it right now with your podcast, with this
Oh,
beautiful podcast that you're
thank
talking to
you.
amazing people.
Yes,
It's such a huge service that you do by doing
thank
this.
you. Yes,
Thank you
my
for doing it.
intention. It really is my intention to share the messages and to raise the vibration of the world.
Mm,
I think I've always felt that as a young child. So
yeah.
hopefully I'm doing that and will continue
No,
to do
hopefully
that.
you are doing
Thank you.
that. You are doing that. Yes.
Just that last question I had was, is there any advice or if anything you wanted to tell you would tell your younger self?
My younger self. It's okay, honey. Really, it's okay. You'll be fine. Trust your heart. Trust your heart. You can trust that who you are is good. Um, and um, and speak out, you know. Just don't be so afraid. Just get up, speak out, raise the energy.
Love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. I appreciate you and everything about you. And thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's been a joy, Rose. Truly a joy. That hour went by so fast. Thank you so
It did.
much for
Thank
asking.
you.